Hey everyone. In this episode, we're sharing a conversation with the CEO of SparkToro, Rand Fishkin. This interview originally aired as part of our agency growth webinar series, and it includes a deep dive Q&A session with Rand answering specific questions about things like content development, influencer marketing, the current state of SEO, digital marketing best practices for marketers, and more. Lots of great stuff in this episode, so let's get into it.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are dialing in from today. And welcome to another session of the Agency Acceleration Series. So we are just past the halfway mark now of this series, and we've had great content. And today will be no different. We're super excited to bring you Rand Fishkin today. If you're not familiar with SharpSpring, SharpSpring is a sales and marketing automation platform, and we've really built our entire business around agencies, which is why this kind of content is so important to us. Our platform helps agencies drive leads for themselves and their customers, convert more of those leads to sales, and really optimize your entire funnel. Today, it truly is almost like this man needs no introduction, but we have Rand Fishkin today, and Rand came up as one of the top influencers that our agency partners and many of you, hopefully on the call, are familiar with, and a trusted source for marketing content and things like that. And so we're super excited to have Rand. And many of you know that he founded Moz back in 2004. I think that year's right. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Rand. But he's also co-founder and CEO of SparkToro. As I mentioned, previous co-founder of Moz and inbound.org. And, I got a chance to meet Rand earlier this week and really enjoyed the conversation. So I'm very excited about today. But it's obvious that he's dedicated his professional life to helping people do better marketing through his blogging, videos, speaking, and his book, Lost and Founder. And having been a part of small SaaS companies and a founder myself, I know how hard it is to start a company. But we're super excited to be able to bring you that book, and we're going to flash it up here on the screen, Lost and Founder, a painfully honest field guide to the startup world. And you can get a signed copy of Rand's book, and we're going to put the link here in the chat so you can go ahead and ask for a demo of SharpSpring. We'd love to show you the platform, and then you can get a signed copy of Lost and Founder as our thank you. Feel free to pose your questions in the chat as we're talking today, and I'll do my best to get to as many of them as we can during today's session. And with that, I think we're ready to bring up Rand. Rand, can you hear me okay?
I can. Thanks for having me, Jay. Great to be here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you for joining. Super pumped to have you. So I already gave you a bit of an intro, and I think a lot of the audience knows who you are, which is why they're here. But can you, for those that don't, do you mind just introducing yourself and telling us all a bit about yourself?
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, for folks who don't know, I started a company initially that was a blog called SEO Moz. Became a very popular resource in the search engine optimization and digital marketing world. And that was very early on. So 2003, at a time when the search engines were, when there was multiple search engines competing. We can talk about monopoly problems with Google later, but the search engines themselves were very, very opaque and secretive about their operations. And Moz was a place where people could come and get very transparent, open information about what was going on in SEO. That blog built a business initially that was a consulting business, and then we transitioned into software in 2007. I became the CEO, and we raised a bunch of venture money, grew rapidly to about $30–40 million a year. I stepped down as CEO in 2014 and left the company in 2018 to start this new one, SparkToro, which is in the audience research, market research space. And yeah, we launched we launched that product, SparkToro, in April of this year, aka the worst time in 90 years to probably launch a new business, and yet somehow it's going okay. I think, as many of you in the marketing and agency world probably know, there's been a lot of shift in demand, but plenty of growth on the e-commerce and internet side, and web usage side, and so many folks have been adopting, mostly agencies, to be honest, SparkToro, and using it. So that's been kind of cool to see. Build a new company, build a product, launch it again, start from scratch again. I'm out here in this quite cold shed out back of my house.
Oh, you're in a shed. Okay.
Yeah, a little shed. I'll show you. See, it's kind of, it was like a garden shed that the previous owner of this house turned into a workspace, and so it's been going quite well for me. Casey and I, my co-founder, and I both work from home, work remotely, and always have, so works out quite nicely. But yeah, so the last few years, for many folks who are familiar with my work and have been following me, I've been sort of a big critic of a lot of the things that Google and Facebook have been doing. I think as they gain duopoly power over the digital advertising and marketing worlds, that's not so great for a lot of us and for a lot of the brands and companies that we help. I also think that there's a lot of value for marketers and for folks who are building up their channels to invest in sources of influence and opportunities outside of just throwing money at Google and Facebook. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that SparkToro tries to help folks with.
Yeah, very, very cool. So as you mentioned, as the founder of Moz, I mean, clearly you know a ton about SEO. You're an expert in the space. When I wanted to learn about SEO and content marketing, I certainly watched a number of your videos.
Yeah,
it's interesting too. I know from our research that a lot of our agency partners also offer SEO services, and care about it. And we're not going to just talk about SEO today, but in your thinking, you're not necessarily in it day to day as much as maybe you were with Moz. But how would you describe the current state of the SEO world, kind of building on what you were talking about just then?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my perception is that there is more opportunity now in SEO than there ever has been. Meaning there's more interest, there are more companies that are investing in it, that want to invest in it. I get emails almost every day asking me, hey, do you provide SEO services? To which, of course, my answer is no, but I can probably refer you to somebody good who does. And my sense on the other side of that, on the negative side of that equation, is that I have been monitoring for several years and reporting on it via the SparkToro blog, clickstream data about what's happening with Google's search volume and what's happening with their search referrals. And you can see a pretty clear pattern the last 5 or 6 years where Google is essentially doing three things. Number one, the percent of searches that result in a paid click, a click on one of Google's ads, that has gone up pretty dramatically. I think 35% over the last 5-6 years, maybe even more than that. Simultaneously, the percent of clicks that Google is sending back to their own properties. So you search Google, you get to Google Maps, Google Flights, Google Hotels, Google Jobs, YouTube, one of Google's entertainment sort of one boxes, right, that give you all the details about that stuff, or go back to an enhanced result inside Google search itself. That number has been climbing pretty dramatically. I believe it is, last time I got data was January, and it was around 6% of all searches, 12% of all clicks, going back to an alphabet property, which is obviously Google's parent company. And then the third one is the worst news of all, which is that the percentage of searches that result in an organic, non-paid click, which is where SEO gets all of its value, that's gone down, right? And that's dropped fairly precipitously. It's more on mobile than on desktop. And so interestingly enough, in the pandemic, when we're all at home and we're on our desktops and laptops, that number hasn't been shrinking as fast this year. It's been sort of plateauing as a result of everybody using their desktops more and their mobiles a little less.
So I'm guessing that's been sort of a slow change to the current state. Have you seen that?
Yeah, this is kind of a gradual, I think I've been monitoring it very closely and reporting on it pretty closely for the last 2.5, 3 years, essentially since my last few months at Moz and then into SparkToro. To be totally honest, part of this is what was driving me to create a company that helped with traffic sources outside of Google is, hey, I'm seeing this problem, this challenge. And yeah, so someone commented in the chat that this is the same story with social. 100% agree. So you can see that, whatever it was 6 years ago, 7 years ago, the average engagement rate on a Facebook page post was in the 7-8% range. Today, average engagement rate with a post from the percent of people who've liked a page is 0.09%. That's according to Rival IQ, who puts out a very good report every year. But 0.09% is, why would you ever try and get Facebook likes? Like, what's the point, right? I just get an email address. My God, their email addresses still have a 25% open rate.
They definitely, email still is king in many ways, right? So, well, I feel like I'm learning a lot already, Rand, and it made me think about the last couple of speakers that we've had on the series. Both Chris Brogan and Drew McClellan talked about agency strategists and owners often kind of finding themselves in that teacher role, and as we met earlier this week, I mentioned that about you as well, that Whiteboard Fridays, especially, you're up there on a whiteboard, that you started in 2008. I think we said Whiteboard Fridays, and you're basically a teacher every Friday. And I think it's intriguing. You sort of have a natural talent for that. I'd love to learn more about how you decided to do that, how successful it was. My perception was pretty darn successful. And do you have any advice for those that would want to create their own episodic content, and how should they go about it?
Yeah, so Whiteboard Friday was not initially successful at all. It was so when we first started doing it, right, this video series, which is essentially just me at a whiteboard talking to folks about SEO and sort of diagramming, how certain things worked. That was the worst performing blog post, right? Piece of content that we put out each week for probably more than its first year of existence. Might have even been 2 years before it started performing even at an average level. And this is the interesting thing about episodic content, right? It does not necessarily start out the strongest. The idea is that it takes a long time to sort of, build up the curve of where it's going. And over time, you're attracting subscribers. Over time, you're attracting sort of loyal viewers and people who enjoy the content and appreciate it. So I think that's a big challenge for folks who are investing in episodic content. By the time I left Moz, by the way, even about 5-6 years into Whiteboard Friday, it became the most successful piece of content that we put out each week, right? It was the most engaged with. It got the most links. It got the most assisted conversions, meaning people who had seen it eventually signed up for a free trial or tried one of our tools or signed up for an email, whatever the conversion counts were in Moz's funnel. And that held true for many, many, many years, right? Because it had built up this strength. So I would urge folks who are thinking about creating episodic content to be ready for a long ramp, right? It is not going to be a, hey, we flip the switch, this thing goes on and it's performing well. That's not going to be the case, right? You are going to struggle at first. You should prepare for that. If you're working with a client, you should prepare for, hey, the first 10 episodes that we create may not be huge hits, but we are going to work on finding our audience, refining the product itself, right? The content that we're creating, refining our strategy for distribution. And as we find that loyal audience and build up that subscription base to this episodic content, we will have a lot more opportunity and success over time. And that, I think that pitch can work well. And when you get, I think the great thing for agencies and consultants is when you can get a client to invest in those sorts of things, you are building in, sort of a loyalty to a loyal relationship between yourself and the client, right? Because you're preparing them for what's going to happen and how the investment's going to go, and then it can work really well over time.
It sort of becomes the digital marketing version of must-watch TV, right? The old Thursday night.
That's exactly what you like. You are essentially building a Netflix show, and what you can imagine that someone watches, for example, right? They're watching you and I on Restream right now, and they're like, "Gosh, Chip's interviews are really good, and I like what these SharpSpring guys are doing. I want to go back and see other previous episodes." Like he mentioned that he had Chris Brogan on. I want to go see that episode. Can I go find that? Now you've built up some loyalty because that connection. There you go. Right, register to access this recording. Good, great timing. But you're essentially right. You're doing exactly what Netflix does with their episodic content, or what a podcaster does, or what someone who writes a book series does. Right, you can attract folks with your current content, and they will go back and check out the previous catalog.
Yeah, no, it's our first time at it, but we're having a great time. So I'm wondering too. I mean, I'm assuming that the content got better over time, but that wasn't the main reason it did better, right? It was the word of mouth. It was the optimization.
I think
it wasn't the reason.
Combination. Yeah. No, I really do think so. The video quality got better. I got better at presenting. If you watch those early Whiteboard Fridays, I have tons of disfluencies, all that kind of stuff interspersed. The quality of the content itself and what I'm telling folks, and the relevance of it, and the usefulness and tactical application of the advice that I'm providing. All of those things were not nearly as solid. So as Whiteboard Friday got better and better, there'd be an episode here or there that would get a ton of attention, right? I remember a few times over the years, there'd be one Whiteboard Friday that got, 100,000 plus views. It was about, I think, one of Google's first Panda updates or something like that, right? Some particular Google update had come out. I had done a video about it, and for whatever reason, the digital marketing world decided, okay, this Rand Fishkin Whiteboard Friday video is the canonical source for information about what happened with this Google update. It got amplified everywhere. It sailed over LinkedIn and Twitter, and was in all these places. And yeah, it had something like 100,000 plus views in its first 3 or 4 weeks. There you go, right? And that created a bunch of new subscribers. So part of it is a consistency of content creation and an improving quality, and then a back catalog and a flywheel model, right? Because the SEO content flywheel is working in conjunction with the production of the content. So Chip, you're getting this effect where essentially each piece of content that you produce is getting easier for you to make, right? Obviously the 100th Whiteboard Friday I filmed took me one take, was immediate, was easy to make for me. And whereas the first one, I was very nervous. It took a lot of work. It was a bunch more editing, all those kinds of things. And you get better at it. And each time you publish, you're getting more results because there's more subscribers. Those people have, though that base is bigger, and so each of them might amplify it more, which will get you more viewers and subscribers. And when they amplify it, that gets you, links, and that gets you rankings. And so now it's easier for you to rank your next piece of content, and you have all these historic rankings, blah, 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 right? It just builds and builds.
Yeah, it builds on itself. Yeah. No, yeah, thanks for the detail there. And I have a specific question on one of the Whiteboard Fridays that maybe we'll hit later, but I do want to transition to SparkToro, which you founded in 2018. So just tell us more about it, why you founded it, what it does, how it can be valuable to agencies, just kind of the whole enchilada, if you will.
Sure. So the idea behind SparkToro is super simple. It is essentially just helping with a particular kind of market and audience research, which is discovering what your audience reads, listens to, watches, visits, subscribes to in a few seconds. So you want to know, right? You're working with a new customer, new company, right? They make software for chemical engineering firms in Canada. And you're like, ooh, I do not know anything about the chemical engineering world. So you look up, you go to SparkToro and you type in, my audience uses these words in their profile, chemical engineer, and is located in Canada. And SparkToro comes back and says, oh yeah, we have about 3,000 chemical engineers in Canada, and here's what websites that they visit. And here are the podcasts that they listen to, and here are the YouTube channels they subscribe to, and here are the social accounts that they follow, and here's the words and phrases they use to describe themselves, and here's the hashtags that they use. And all of this data is accessible in just a few seconds. It is designed to help marketers really solve that problem of where can I go reach an audience that's not just throwing money at Google and Facebook, right? Could I find podcasts to sponsor that reach my target audience? Could I find places to pitch for an op-ed or a guest content contribution? Could I find, for SEO, a lot of it is on the link building side. For PR folks, it's a lot on the pitch and outreach side. And having that data at your fingertips is something that took, I don't know if any of you have done it before, but we talked to a bunch of agencies who have, and it's brutal, right? That figuring that equation out is months of research, right? It's let's assemble an audience panel and let's go ask them, and we'll get them to take this survey. And if any of you have tried it, right, it is just brutal to try and ask people, hey, what podcast do you listen to? What you really want to do is you want to take their phone, log in, look at all the stuff that they visited. And that's essentially what SparkToro does, but it does it by crawling public profiles, assembling those into a giant, database that you can search, and then give you a bunch of data about that audience, right? Behavioral data, subscription data, what are they following? What are they subscribed to? What are they listening to? What are they linking to? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, and I just started to play with it, by the way. And
oh, cool.
I can see it becoming super useful, for our agencies as well. And many of them, I'm sure all the time are telling their customers or their clients, as you're building a campaign, the first thing you have to do is get inside the head of your customer, and how do you do that? Who are they? What else do they read? Where are they? What are they thinking about? Sort of an ICP tool in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of agencies, they use it, both on the client work side, but also in the pitch process. So, I'm working on some case studies that we're publishing for SparkToro, but was talking to an agency owner the other day who was like, oh, well, the reason we're a subscriber is because every time we pitch a new customer, we can walk in and say, we know your audience as well or better than you do. And we can tell you that, you're thinking about doing a big ad buy in the Wall Street Journal, but I can tell you that 14% of your audience subscribes to or reads or engages with this website, this niche publication, and only 4% engage with the Wall Street Journal. And you walk in with data like that and the ability to tell them, and we can tell you a bunch more about your customers and your audience. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it seems very cool. So with SparkToro, I was talking to Jay Bear about this, who was on earlier in the series, and I know that Jay, and he kind of mentioned, hey, sometimes
good work, Chip. Bring up the previous episodes and how valuable they are.
Exactly. People drop those in. Those are internal links I'm doing.
Exactly.
See that?
It's the internal links of webinars and
episodic content. Yeah, exactly. So, but it's been SparkToro has been talked about as sort of an influencer marketing tool. And what's your take on that? Do you see it that way at all? First of all.
Yeah. So
and secondary, Rand, what's your take on influencer marketing and the state of it, and if agencies should pursue it?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that 6-7 years ago, influencer marketing, the definition, if you'd asked marketers, hey, what is influencer marketing? They would have said, oh, that's the process whereby you go and find all of the sources of influence, the blogs and websites and mainstream media and podcasts and YouTube channels and social accounts that your audience follows, listens to, pays attention to, and you go do marketing in all of those places directly, which I think is brilliant. What a great way to do marketing. Today, unfortunately, influencer marketing has come to mean pay half-naked people on Instagram $500 to pose with your product, which is a very niche tactic that's probably dumb for most people, but works for a few B2C brands in some very particular industries. And it's extremely frustrating to me that the definition of that phrase has changed. SparkToro does not help with today's influencer marketing, right? We intentionally leaned away from the sort of, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok sort of sponsor model, and towards the old school definition of influencer marketing, the go find where your audience hangs out and do marketing in all those places. So I don't know. My take on the rise of influencer marketing is, if you mean it in the old school way, incredibly smart. That's exactly what marketers should be doing. Going direct, right? If you go find 10 websites, 10 podcasts, 10 YouTube channels that your audience pays attention to, and you get an op-ed in those mainstream publications, and you get coverage from those places via PR or outreach, and you get picked up by those podcasts, right? And you get someone from the company to be featured as a guest. You go and do a direct sponsorship. That can be such an incredible way to build your brand recognition and then to get high ROI results. Awesome. Going and paying an influencer in the sort of half-naked person on Instagram definition does not work very well, because the reason people follow, and this is not, I am not someone who's completely against salacious content. Like, if you want to be body positive and show yourself off on the internet, you go for it, right? That's totally your decision. There's nothing wrong with it in my book, but I don't think you're being followed and connected with for the same reason that brands want to reach you. And so unless we're talking about, I don't know, something very directly related, what swimwear or makeup or sort of beauty products, fashion, a few other industries, I think influencer marketing is not a great match. Modern influencer marketing.
Got it. Yeah. No, that's helpful. Thank you. And as we're talking about SparkToro, some more questions are coming in. So I'm going to go to a question that's come in right now. So Marie asks, can SparkToro help with higher ed? And talk about the global online audiences, element of it. Does that exist as well?
Sure. So second part first, SparkToro database is global, but it's English language. So if you are targeting Australia, Canada, UK, yes. US, obviously, yes. If you're targeting Spanish language profiles, Italian, German, not yet. Give us probably next year. The first part of that question around higher ed, yes, absolutely, right. So you could look for. I was helping someone just the other day who was trying to target essentially students who are looking for a particular type of program, and so we looked together at my audience uses I think they used a particular hashtag that was specific to that educational niche. And then they also often had the word, I think it was like nursing student. Someone was looking for that. And so if you can find words and phrases that your audience either uses online, right? So not searches for, but talks about in their Instagram updates, their Twitter posts, their Facebook posts, public Facebook posts, of course, those kinds of things, then yes, we can get it. We crawl data just like Google does. So, when you see a public Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, Medium, Quora, Pinterest, right, posts, that's how we collect data. We just crawl it just the same way Google crawls and indexes data on the web. And that builds up the profile database. And so if someone uses words, if they call themselves something in their profile or their LinkedIn job title, what have you, then we're able to extract that data. And we obviously don't have everyone on the internet, but we have a reasonable sample size in English, about 75 million profiles. So pretty good coverage for most stuff in English.
Yeah. And I had asked you earlier this week, if you remember, if it was AI, Rand. And you said, no, hey, this is not AI, but
it's not
there
AI.
are a couple of questions coming in for how you get clickstream data and things like that, But I think you already sort of answered the question. Yeah.
Yeah, I see some comments from folks, from Ryan in particular, that we buy clickstream data. So we do not buy clickstream data for SparkToro. I did previously work with JumpShot to assemble the data that you and I, Chip, talked about at the very start of this session around Google's click-through rate. So yes, how is SparkToro getting clickstream data these days? We are not. Ta-da!
Ta-da! That's the answer. Yeah. You're crawling everything. So, exactly. A thing that I've asked the other guests on this series, Rand, is, are there services you think agencies should be offering to their clients that maybe they're not? I don't know if there's a lump answer to that one, by the way. Yeah. But I'd love to get your take.
Yeah, sure. My sense is that agency owners and individual practitioners, right, the consultants inside agencies, have a much better feel for that than I do. Where I have seen some significant challenges is I think that a lot of agencies sell themselves short by not having conversations around strategy and how it connects to tactics. And so the challenge becomes building a practice where you can have that higher level executive conversation about why are you trying to achieve these things and what are the goals for what you're achieving. And then how do the tactics that we're engaging in plug into that? And so, I recommend a lot of agencies, and SparkToro uses a ton of agencies. I think we've used 7 different consultants or agencies in the past year and a half as we've sort of launched SparkToro and done some work on that. We've done conversion rate optimization and design and UX stuff. And we used an agency called Elevate for sort of our SaaS beta test and early user adoption. So I love working with agencies. I think that, I don't know if you hear this, Chip, but I hear this advice all the time in startup world, like, don't use consultants and agencies because you need to build that muscle yourself. And if you need to be competitive in your field, so you've got to build it. And I completely disagree. Totally disagree. I love using agencies. It helps my cost structure. I get way more value from working with savvy agencies and consultants because they see my problem, 100 times in a year from 100 different companies instead of just once from us, right? And so the perspective that they bring, the ability to make smart, quick decisions is just terrific, right? Having seen that problem before and seen how people solved it or didn't, that's huge. I love that. I think that I see a number of agencies struggling to get their clients to buy in on the strategy side so that there's a connection to the tactics. And especially in like SEO and paid search and content marketing, a lot of times the work that's requested from whatever it is, the VP of marketing or the CMO, is not directly connected to what the board, what the CEO, what the executive suite actually really wants in terms of results. And that disconnect, when that disconnect happens, I think everyone is worse off for it. So maybe that's not an answer to the services, but I think that's an answer to what conversation should you be having with the client before you go engage, and understanding what they actually need to drive in their business as opposed to which tactic they think they're buying from you. Much better way to go.
No, it makes great sense. And I'm going to call a bit of an audible here because, next week we're going to have Jason Swank, and, Jason's going to be talking about growth and scale. And we actually have a question that's sort of relevant that kind of builds on what we were just talking about, Rand, that Jason posed to you. That's another kind of constant thing we've done in these episodes. We've had the next guest post a question to the previous one. And so Jason asks, so many small agencies dabble in a lot of disciplines, SEO, for example, website design, display advertising, et cetera, right? But fail to find the growth lever for their business. So what advice would you have for them as they decide how to specialize and find their niche?
Yeah, I think I like specialization at a slightly higher level. So I think specializing in, we are a design and UX consultancy, or we're a sort of software as a service consultancy, or we're a content consultancy, or a whatever, digital advertising. I think those kinds of specializations can work pretty well. I don't know that going further down too far is necessarily the right way to find growth. I think it depends on what you want for your agency, right? Because many times, Chip, when I talk to agency owners, their goal is not exclusively a growth-driven one, right? Their goal is how do we find a consistently repeatable pattern of doing great work for our clients, finding the next clients, keeping clients with us. A lot of agency owners that tell me, I don't need to grow my team huge. If we grow 20 or 30% this year, that's wonderful. That's great. I don't need, 50, 100% year over year growth. And I think that's great, right? I think that sustainable, profitable growth is exactly the model that you want in agency world. And I think that a lot of that comes from a recognition that your specialization can be a limiting factor, and that's okay, right? That it's okay to specialize relatively deeply and then go find your customers or recognize that the market is coming towards you for something and sort of do some marketing for yourself so that you're producing whatever it is, content or thought leadership around that particular topic and tactic, case studies around that topic and tactic. I think that can be pretty effective. Yeah. Specialization it's a challenging topic. It depends so much on what you're trying to do. So I think it's an easier conversation to have one-to-one than it is to have broadly.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think just my own experience is some of the agencies that are doing specialization tend to be doing well now, right?
Sure.
And some of the more generalists maybe not as well. There's an interesting question that came in because you're very much you're a founder, you're a practitioner, you're a strategist, you're a teacher, as I mentioned. There have been some questions asked about, what are the number one skills marketers need to have? Ryan here asks, what has been the best acquisition channel for you, SparkToro, if you're willing to share, with the guests here today, what you think is most successful for acquisition and things that our agency should think about if they haven't tried those channels yet.
Yeah, so we dog food a little bit. Our most successful acquisition channel by far and very obviously is other people's platforms. So essentially every week I am doing a few things just like what I'm doing with you today, Chip. Essentially being on other people's podcasts, doing webinars, doing events and conferences. I've done a number of like AMAs on different websites and in different communities and been published on other people's blogs and written about. And a lot of that comes through essentially my own activity, like going to social networks, posting some things, engaging, building relationships. We've done a lot of email marketing, all that kind of stuff. And, but by far, we have about 100 people a day on average on weekdays trying SparkToro, right? It's free to try. So people come through for free. We have a forever free plan and they, sign up and use that. And a ton of that is very difficult to attribute because most of it is coming from, it's not true word of mouth. It's essentially like word of founder doing, other people's platforms, right? And engaging on other folks' sites. So yeah, I do this in SparkToro myself, right? I'll go like, oh, okay, I want to reach audience, people who are talking about market research. And then let me go figure out the influential podcasts. Okay, let me start a conversation and dialogue to those. And that often leads to good opportunities. So that's been a big win for us. I would say the other big acquisition channel that we had has been kind of an email marketing strategy. So we built up a big list before launch through, again, a combination of using other people's platforms and content marketing. Building that list, we had about maybe 17,000 people who had subscribed to be notified at launch for our product launch. And when we sent out that email, that is essentially how we got our first 150 customers, paying customers, and of course, many thousands of free users. And that's been something that we keep building on and doing, occasional email marketing to that group. Quite successful. I think we talked earlier that the MailChimp average number for open rate is like 25%. We've been seeing more like 55% open rates and, up to 5 to 10% click-through rates. I think we had one email that went out that got even higher than that. So it's solid, right? Like that's,
Yeah, I mean, email and is a phenomenal channel. I think I mentioned before I've been in it like 20 years or something, so but it's still super high ROI channel. Yeah. Hey, we're getting towards the end here, and I want to make sure I ask a few more questions.
One thing
I didn't hit was just your book, and you're a founder and agency owners and managers these days, any entrepreneurs, right? And agency owners and even in leads in small agencies are very much kind of living with the current environment and trying to keep their sanity and their momentum. kind of what kind of nuggets would you provide to the audience for how to keep momentum and sanity as a founder?
It's funny. I was having a conversation with Casey, my co-founder at SparkToro, just the other day about how one of the most challenging things to do as a founder is manage your own psychology, right? Just to stay sane and emotionally healthy. And we were on the phone, right? And he's like, "Oh, I hate it. I hate worrying about that." I was like, "Hey, man, I feel your pain. I know how it goes." To be honest, the best advice I can give you is, it's very challenging, but sleep. Getting lots of sleep, not just enough sleep, but a lot of sleep is really good for your mental health and psychology. And, when I think about what an agency owner, what a manager, what a CEO has to do well, it is make great decisions. And all the scientific research in the world says that your decision-making skills will be best when you are well-fed and well-rested and in reasonably good shape. Your physical body is what is providing a ton of the quality around your decision making. So if you can find ways, whatever they are, to get 9 hours in bed and 8 hours of sleep, or however much your body needs, that will be huge. It's way more important for you to do that than get that extra hour of work in, those extra 2 hours of work in. I think that we have this weird culture in American entrepreneurship that prioritizes and glorifies the sacrifice of your body and yourself and your health in exchange for your business. And that is not how it works at all. That is in fact the opposite of how you do well in your working life. Is you sleep well, you eat well, you get your 45 minutes of exercise a day, you go on your walk, you ignore your email for a little bit, and your decision-making skills, your ability to choose what you invest in and how and why, will be massively upgraded. That's, I think, how you keep your sanity and momentum.
You seem well rested. So do you have a tip you'd be willing to share with the audience?
So I'm a terrible sleeper, and this is something I've had to really work on all my adult life. But I think the three pieces of common advice given are: have enough active minutes in a day to get you tired. That's usually 30 to 45 minutes at least of sort of elevated heart rate. The other thing that I do, not responsibly and consistently, but when I'm good at it, I do well, which is to stop no screens for an hour before I go to sleep. That can be very helpful. It really helps. I try and trick myself by having something I really want to read that is not a screen, like a book or not comic books. What are those called? They're like comic books, but they're big ones. Trade paperback. I think that trade paperback, something like that. And I also really recommend and like having we have a sleep noise machine. So it makes like a white noise generator machine in our bedroom that works quite well. And sometimes, Chip, I know this is cheating, I will take a half or a quarter dose of NyQuil.
Okay.
Helps me sleep.
You have to do and sometimes you might wake up a little groggy.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Melissa and Netta.
But yeah, nothing a little coffee can't fix the next morning too. So, Rand, I think our time is up. That 45 minutes went amazingly fast.
Yeah.
And before I kind of move on to what's next with the series, do you have any final comments? I hopefully you'll be able to come back and join us again. Yeah,
no, I really enjoyed this, Chip. I would love to do it again. And for all the folks out there, if you want to give SparkToro a spin, like I said, it's free. I also am very passionate about not letting not letting sort of popular culture and media guide what you think you're supposed to be doing as a founder, and instead finding your happy place. I don't believe that anyone's value or worth in this world is tied to their, sort of entrepreneurial or capitalist achievements. You are worthy and wonderful because you exist and you're a human being and you're kind to other people around you. And don't get distracted from what really matters. I love helping people build their businesses and build great lives because of that. But I also recognize that's not the only thing in this world. So hopefully we can leave it there. And I look forward to joining you again.
Yeah, thanks, Rand. Those are super wise words. And you may have some self-help future in front of you as well.
I'm not deep in that world, but I do recognize that there's a lot of bias the other way, and I don't love that.
Yeah, certainly. Taking care of yourself is super important. Well, thanks again.